Okay, so let's see, like question number two, which is the next Python interview question, and it is like a more and less similar to the question number one, which we covered in the last video. So the question is like what is CLS? So the interview might ask what is CLS, and can we use some other variable name instead of CLS? So CLS is just a class name. So let's jump into the PyCharm, like what is CLS and where actually we use, and then we able to answer this question. Okay, so generally when we define any class, so let's suppose I am defining the class person, and I am defining the init method, and the class this person is taking the first name and the last name, and I have to write like this only: self dot first name is equal to first name, and self dot first, yeah, self dot last name is equal to last name. All right, so generally we define like this, which is perfectly fine, and we can create an object p1 is equal to person. We can create an object, and we can pass like the first name, and we can pass the last name. All right, and we can print the p1 object, and we can access this variable like p1 dot last name and p1 dot first name and p1 dot last name. So which is perfectly fine. So which is like the last video, like which we cover self. So 1 minute, let me, yeah. So now if we like run this, so we are like getting the output, which is very simple code. We are doing nothing here. But the question says, examiner says, like what is CLS? So CLS is being used when we have to call the methods. Uh, Basically, it is being used for the class methods. So as an example, so let's suppose if you define one more method, def and from full name. I am defining one more method which will take as a full name as an argument. All right. So full name and as argument. So see, by default here we are giving like self, which is a normal method, like as an init. Init it is a normal method because it is being accessed using the instance of the particular class. But if we have to access our like variable using this class, then that is called a class method. So to define a class method, we use the class decorator, right, as a class decorator. And here generally we use CLS as a keyword, right? I'm going to explain you like what is the use of this class method. Why can't we just use the init method? Like is there any special use of this class method which we can't achieve using the init method? So we are going to cover like everything. So this CLS, like what is this CLS? First, like where we see this CLS in our whole life of Python. So whenever we define any class method now, so this function by default take the first argument as a class, right? And to accept like this function, init function by default take the first argument as the instance of the object. So that's like similarly this function, if we define it as a decorator, then this function is expecting as a class as an argument as a first function. So as an example, this function we are passing p1, and for this function we have to pass the person is a class. So let's suppose then we it will get some another variable full name, and let's extract the first name and the last name from the full name. First name last name is equal to full name dot split, okay, and then return. I'm also tell you like what is going to return it, first name and the last name. Okay. Now, if I have to call this function, like the recommended approach is 1 minute. So the recommended approach is we have to call using the class because it is a class method, and class method is being called by the class itself. So person dot from full name. So first argument is the class which we are already passing. The second argument is the full name. So we have to pass the full name. Sumanshu Nankana. We are passing the full name. And it is going to return something. So let's suppose it is going to return something. Now let's print P2. So basically, class method generally used to create, like, it has like multiple functionalities. So the first functionality is it is going to create an instance of the class, right? So you can create an instance of the class like this as well, like person, right? But when you do like this, by default the init method is being called, and it is being expected the first name and the last name should be passed. But let's suppose user want to pass the full name, Sumanshu and Ankana. See, there are two user. One user want to pass first name and the last name separately, and there is another user that want to pass Sumanshu and Ankana as a full name. He or she don't want to enter like the first name as a separate, then last name as a separate. Then the first approach is like you can define two classes. Then one class is this and another one more class, and the first class took first name and the last name, and other class take the full name. That is going to like work, and we can create two object. But there's one more approach. uh, we have to create an object, right? So it is creating a class object itself. So if you print p2, it is the same as the p1 object. It is the same as the p1 object, right? So that's why it is returning class. Class means like person. So it generally look like person and bracket start, and we are passing the first name comma last name. So at the back end whenever you do like this, whenever you do like this, right? So at the back end only this only person comma Manchu comma Nankana. At the back end the init function is only being called, right? So if the user wants, like I don't want to pass the first name and the last name. One user said I want to pass the first name and the last name. The other user said I don't want to pass the first name and the last name. I want to pass the full name. So first approach is you have create two classes, like one is for like if the user pass this, but that is not a good way, right? So other approaches we can use the class method. So class method is basically you can create two constructors. So one constructor is this, which we are creating using the init method. The other constructor is like this only. So this is also a constructor, because now at the back end, the init function is being called, because CLS is class person, and first name is first name like Sumanshu, so last name is Nankana. And whenever we call this thing like class, whenever we call this thing, by default the init is being called. So basically we have created a second constructor. So class method is used to create a second constructor for us, and generally it is going to return the object of the class. So that's why it is going to return the object of the class. So and now we so now so we so p2 is the same as the p1. So p1 we created from init. P2 at the back end only init, but first we give the full name, and the full name then it is going to call that as well, like this thing as well, person Sumanshu and Kana. And then once this is being called, then the init at the back end is being called. So if you want to access p2 dot first name and p2 dot last name, so let's try to run it. So you could see the output is same, Sumanshu and Kana and Sumanshu and Kana, and there are two different objects. So we can create the two objects. But like, what is the use? What is the use of this? All right. So one use is if there is any like thing you want to create a two constructor. So first is like, what is CLS? So CLS is just a like an argument which which is being used within the class method functions, and this is generally the first argument, and it accepts class as an argument. So CLS generally used as a CLS represent for the class. All right. So CLS is whenever we define a class in Python. So whenever we define a class in Python, CLS is often used as the first parameter. So CLS is being used as the first parameter in a class method only, right? Which is a method that belongs to the class itself. So this method belongs to the class itself rather than to the instance. So by convention, the first parameter of class method is usually CLS. The short form is class and refer to the class object rather than the instance of the class. So this is the class object rather than any specific stuff. So when you call a class method, the first argument passed to the method is always the class object conventionally called CL. So whenever we are calling this method, the first argument is the class rather than the instance, rather than the object. Okay, because if you define some other method like a def like a function, so we are passing self, and if I have to call this function, I have to call this function from the object p1 dot function. So first argument is the instance of the class, not the class, but in the class method the first argument is the class itself. All right, so this is the difference, and this allows to modify the class. Okay, leave that. By convention, the Python should return a class object. So there is a convention by default, not by default, but by convention, a class method in Python should return a class object. So we are returning a class object. So how we are going to create an object? Class name, and whatever the argument it is being expected, like first name, last name, that's it. So by default it is going to return the uh, object only. Okay, so the purpose of the class method is to operate on the classifier rather than on the instance. So it doesn't mean we can't call from full name using the instance. We can call like generally, like what we think, okay, this is expecting CLS, so it means we have to call using the class. But no, this is not true. We can call this method using the object as well. So let's suppose I am creating the third object p. Now I am calling the from full name, and I am passing something prince. All right, and I can print p3, and I can print p3 dot first name and p3 dot last name. So let's try to run it. So the third object also being created at some other location, and we are getting the first name as the prince and second name as a butler. So we can access this method from the object. But how we are going to access this method from the object? Even we mentioned CLS. So no, so CLS is not a reserved keyword, because whenever we call any method from P1, then we pass self, right? So self is not a reserved keyword. We can pass self 1, self 2, self 3. So similarly, CLS is not a reserved keyword. We can pass my class 1, my class 2, anything, ABCD, anything. But as a standard convention which the normal people are using, self and the CLS. So whenever we call from P1, so P1 is calling from full name. So this is the object. So by default, it treat it as a self. By default, it treat it as a self, because self can be anything, because self is not a reserved keyword. So it doesn't treat as a like a see, it doesn't like a hard code thing. It should be the class. No, generally we have to pass the class, because we mention as a class, but we can access this variable using, because when we pass p1, so p1, the first argument will come here, that's it. Because the first argument can be anything, self, abcd, cls is another variable. I want to use cls, all right? So that we can do that, and but anyhow it is going to return the some another object which is the p3. All right, so there is a one more, because this look like not a practical day-to-day life use case. It could be one of the practical day-to-day life use case, but one of the most important practical day life use cases, the database connection. So let's suppose you created one class, database connection, and in your project you are using the 3 to 4 databases. One is MySQL, one is the PostgreSQL, one is the MongoDB, one is the SQLite, and there are many more. So there are multiple approaches. So first approach is you can create different classes for all the databases. Like one is for the MySQL, one is for the PostgreSQL, one is for the MongoDB, one is for the SQLite, just to create the connection. But if I want only one database connection class, and this database connection class is going to return only and only my connection object. So how I can do in normally way? Just ignore the class method. In normally way, what I have to do, I have to create the init method, right? Which is going to like accept. So accept something. So it is going to accept something. So if you go to the MySQL, so MySQL is accepting hostname, username, and the password. So so if we have to go to the MySQL, so MySQL is going to accept the hostname, like, and username and the password. All right. So it is going to accept. But if it is the MongoDB, it is the MongoDB, it is going to accept the MongoDB hostname and the port number as well. So MySQL is like we are not passing the port number. Maybe it is taking the default port number, but it is expecting the port number. If we like think about the like Postgres as well. So let me check the connection string where they are calling the connection. So connect to the Postgres server database server in the Python. Just a second. Yeah. So it wants hostname, database, and a user. It doesn't want username. The MySQL wants user. This also want user. This also want password. This also want database. This also wants host. All right. This doesn't want database. All right. And along with that, like in the MongoDB, it wants something else. All right. So there could be different parameters. So how you are going to achieve the same functionality within the same class? So one approach is whatever the argument, let's suppose one is the user argument, one is the port argument, one is the one more argument. So one is a like database argument, one is the DB name argument. There could be multiple argument. Then you will check, okay, if database is not none, then it could be MySQL. Then you will do something, okay, self dot something, or you not even self dot. Let's suppose import MySQL dot connector. Then you are going to create a connection. How you are going to create a connection? So we can just copy paste the code, like this code. Let's suppose. So you are going to create a connection like this. Sorry, let me copy paste. So you are going to create a connection like this. All right. So this is like the connection which you have created, and you will put, okay, elif. If it's a DB name, then it could be like Postgres SQL. You import Postgres. So for the Postgres, we have to import like a PSY COPG2, right? So you do like that. So you will create like some connection string here, right? Similarly, let's suppose there should be like some other thing. You will see, okay, this is the thing. Then you will create the MongoDB connection here, right? And if there is some other thing, but this is not a very readable, all right? Because if new database is coming and that is accepting some new field which is not being accepted by here, so and if we have to use the same class, so first thing is we have to modify the existing function. So because why we have to modify, we have to pass some other argument. Let's suppose some ABC argument like that database is expecting, which is not till now is being expected. So we have to like modify the existing database, so which is violating our like solid principles, like open close principle. Like we should not like modify the existing like functions, because it is like modifying the existing function. Also, if we add something here, let's suppose in future if something will come, again we are modifying the existing function, which is the init function, which is wrong. So how you are going to achieve that particular functionality? So the best approach is using the class method, because the class method is used to create the object of the classes, right? So what we can do is, all right, so let's suppose import pymongo, right? So right now let's suppose there are uh, three database in our application. So we can like do like MySQL connect, and it will take a class. And we know MySQL connect take host name, let's suppose host name, username, and password only, right? Then we can like do like that. Connection is equal to MySQL dot connector dot connect, and it will pass, okay, host is equal to host, user is equal to user, and password is equal to password, and it is going to return CLS and connection, because we need to return the connection. And we can again define the class method, one more class method. Let's suppose Mongo connection, Mongo connect. Let's suppose it accept only host and the port. So just don't go with the code. This code might be wrong, just because in this video I am going to explain the class method. This code we can copy from the Google itself, because what is the function, like how we are going to create a connection string for the MySQL, how we are going to create the PyMongo connection string, or for the Postgres SQL. So that we can like go through the documentation of the particular database or particular library. That is a different thing, right? Let's suppose we have to create a connection. So maybe PyMongo dot connect. So there could be some other syntax. Maybe here MongoDB colon, and here it could be host, and then it could be port, something like that. And we have to return class connection. We have to create an like we return an object. One more method, class method. Let's suppose is the Postgres SQL. So Postgres connect, and let's suppose it is going to accept the host name, it is going to accept the DB name as well, and it is going to accept the user, it is going to accept the password. All right. And then we are going to again create a like a ps ycopg2 dot connect, host is equal to host, and user is equal to user, and so on, like whatever the argument this method is going to accept. Basically we have to return the class of the connection, right? So right now we define three method, and there is a one more method, that is the init. Why we need the init method? Because this is going to return the class, but at the back end, class is going to return calling the init method, and it is accepting one variable connection. So connection, so which is self dot connection is equal to connection. All right. Now let's suppose in this is of my my application, I am using three database, so I can create a one database class, a database connection class. So I can create a like, okay, SQL connection. I can call database connection dot MySQL connect, and whatever the argument it wants, I can pass. Similarly, I have to create the Mongo connection. I can call the database connection dot Mongo connect, and whatever the argument it want, I can pass. Similarly, Postgres connection, Postgres connection, and I can create the database connection dot Postgres connect, and whatever the argument it is going to accept, I can pass. So within, say, if I have to define init method only, right? Because whenever we have to define the connection, we have to pass some host name, port name, and by default it's going to connect call the init method. If I have to implement using the init method, then it will be very complicated, as like we just see. We have to call the if this method, and if some other argument will come, then we have to modify the init by passing some other argument, which is going to again violating our solid principle, open close principle, basically, right? But this is the beauty of the class method. So in this scenario, we can use the class method, right? So now let's suppose if in future some other database come, let's suppose the SQLite come, so I don't need to modify the existing functions. I can just create the one more function, so which is not violating my like solid principles. So what I can do is class method, I can create a def SQLite connect and class, and I can pass like whatever like it is being expected. Let's suppose it's going to accept it only host name and the port name. We can do connect, SQLite dot connect, and whatever the argument it is going to ask, then we can return CLS connection. Right? So if in future one more database come, we can create a single class for all the database connection. So this is the beauty of the class method. Right? But there is one more question. So can we use some other variable name instead of the class? So the answer is yes, we can use. So this is not a hardcore thing. So let's suppose we can use the, here it is this my, I can use the my class. But if I'm using my class here, I have to use the my class here as well. I can use here my class one. So same variable I have to use here. All right. So it is not mandatory we have to use CLS. Only the thing is, because we are calling this method, class method, using the class, and it is going to accept the first variable. So whatever the variable we are going to define, it is going to accept within that. Right? So there is no hard and fast rule we have to pass the CLS, but there is a convention which we have to follow, which like Python programmers are follow. Otherwise it is very difficult to understand, like for the, if someone is new, like what is my class, like is it argument, it's a variable, what is this? If we mention CLS, then okay, that person is going to understand, because yes, he's just going to remember, okay, CLS is being used for the class method whenever we have to accept any, whenever we have to call this function from the class. So this is like mainly the interview question. What is CLS? We have covered what is CLS. So it is a first parameter in the class method, which is belong to the class itself rather than this, and it is going to return the object of the class. Right? And can we use some other variable? Yes, we can use some other variable because it is not a reserved keyword. And what are the use cases? I can show you the use cases. One use cases I show using the class method, can we use the alternative constructor? Like I show you the name. Some person want to pass the first name and the last name. The other person want to pass the full name. The one more scenario which we have seen, like the database connections. Right? So one more, like in day-to-day life example, the real life example in our projects. Like if we have to create the database connection, then we can use that, and we want to define the one class, so you can define the, like, so there, it is not even mandatory to use the class method. You can achieve these things without even using the class method. You can create different classes. You can use the init method. You can pass the if else condition. So yes, it is not mandatory to use the class method, but if you use that class method, then the readability of the code is going to improve. You are not even violating the solid principle. So that is the beauty of that class method. So that's it. So that's the end of this video. So thank you.